not taken the DSLR out. Not much, at least, for a long time. I think I took it out once about a year ago. It's still in pretty good shape. I didn't realize how long I had this thing. It's a Sony A77, Alpha 77. I've had this thing about 8 years. I didn't realize I had it that long. It's looking good. This probably isn't the best lens for today, but well, we'll see what happens. This is funny, I thought this said Sorabji. Just out of the corner of my eye, I was like, there are people named Sorabji out there, but, and this is close, but it's not one of them. Don't know what kind of name this is. Sorabji Tito Goes? I don't know. Oh, I even said Sorabji, didn't I? Sorabji. Interesting name, but not Sorabji. I've seen this a few times now. I always think it's a giant tooth. But it's a diamond, or it's supposed to represent a diamond. This is the Tiffany jewelry store. Giant tooth. Let's take a look at the ass of Atlas. I sent a picture of this to my mother once, and she said, boy, I'd hate to be downwind from that. Midtown in general is starting to feel a little closer to normal. Whatever that was. But Rockefeller Center is still pretty damn dead. I think maybe, I don't even think half the shops are open. And they're also renovating. They're changing. I'm not sure what the plan is, but for probably the next 6 months, big parts of the floor space are going to be off limits, and the skating rink is closed. But somebody informed me that this has been long planned since well before the pandemic. So some of the closures might not be as ominous as they seem. Top of the rock, or as I like to call it, tip of the cock. I've been up there a couple of times. It is actually really a cool thing to see. Much better view than from the Empire State Building, if you're into that kind of thing. Empire State, you're like you're in a cage. But yeah, all these shops are closed at this end. Pretty much everything from here out, I think, is closed. And I can't get to the post office anymore from down here. I have to take this circuitous route, which includes stairs. And there are some days when I just cannot handle stairs. But you can see all these announcements that changes are coming. I'm going to look that up when I get home, see what this is about. I mean, in the past, this whole area was wide open, and now it's all these little narrow Habitrail passages, is what it feels like. Behind this wall in front of me is the skating rink. Very strange to see my old stomping ground look like this, but things change. This, in the past, I would have gone through here to get to the post office. I'm not complaining or anything, don't get me wrong. Things change, and I'm okay with that. This is where I get my ashes. I didn't get them this year. They probably didn't even do it this year. It's a pretty heavy ritual, the ashes there. The way they chant ashes to ashes, dust to dust, or something. I forget exactly what they say, but to dust you shall return. And the ashes that they smear on your head feel like the dust that you're going to turn into, the dirt that you're going to turn into when you're moldering in the grave. I dated a woman who studied architecture and traveled Europe, seeing all the great cathedrals and stuff. She said St. Patrick's is just kind of cute compared to the great European cathedrals. I'll take her word for it. She seemed to know what she was talking about. She obviously knew what she was talking about. But there's a connection. Calvary Cemetery is owned by the St. Patrick Diocese. And the Civil War monument at Calvary was built by the Dratty brothers. And the Dratty brothers built that pulpit that you can sort of barely see up ahead at the front. Solid marble. Much of what the Dratty brothers did at Calvary was build marble monuments for the wealthy. And they haven't survived the elements very well. On the other hand, the so-called poor man's mausoleum, which were the monuments made out of zinc, and they were called zinkers, those things have survived perfectly over 100 years in many cases. But the identities of all those rich people with their fancy marble monuments have been largely erased. Make of that what you will. Here it is up close, the Dratty pulpit. And there's the pipe organ. It's unfortunate that the organ as an instrument has been largely marginalized simply on account of the fact that so many of them are in churches. It used to be a pretty popular instrument. People had them at home. Not this size, of course, but the Cornell Club is where my high school hosts a regional, what they call reunion, where anybody in the tri-state area who went to the school is invited to just meet and greet and mingle and whatever. And I've been to a few of those. They seem kind of pointless to me, but I became interested in returning because as I learned at the first one I went to, the radio personality Lionel went to my high school, and he was at the first one that I went to, but I didn't have the nerve to talk to him. And now I'd be totally fine approaching the guy, but he seemed like an interesting individual and maybe somebody that could get me into the radio business. But he hasn't been to any of these since. I don't know if many famous people from my high school, I don't really care about famous, but he might be among the most famous. Lou Piniella went to my high school. What do I care, right? That dude Malik, he's been putting those signs up on Midtown payphones for a long time. It's probably been 10 years. I guess it must work for him because he's pretty persistent. This is where I made almost all my Tinder dates. Speaking of which, I met somebody here once who asked me how many payphones are there in New York, just because naturally the subject of payphones came up in our conversation. And I said 7,500, which was about right at the time. And that reminded her in turn that she once interviewed for a job at a consulting company. And one of the questions they asked in the interview was, how many payphones are there in New York? And she, I don't think she said what her response was, but the sort of answer they were looking for was, well, I don't know, but we would calculate based on the assumption that there's one at every intersection, and we would calculate the number of intersections there are in Manhattan based on street numbers and just calculations and blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of thinking they were looking for. So all I could do was laugh, because if they'd asked me, I would have failed the question for knowing the answer. This is one of so many times when I wished I had been recording video when something like this happened, because this was a pretty funny scene. I mean, not side-splittingly funny, but that's my hat, the red hat, and it was windy as a motherfucker up there today on the Queensboro. I shouldn't have even been wearing the thing, but it went flying off. Just racing with the wind. I mean, it could not have been moving any faster. The dude on the bike was up and saw it fly off my head. He was up in front of me when it happened. So he, you can see he was nice enough to at least try to grab it for me, but he never did, or he could just never get his hand on it. So it ended up rolling all the way to where those two people up in the distance are, and the woman on the left grabbed it, and it looked like she asked the guy on the bike if it was his. It looked like she was getting ready to return it to him, but I could see that he looked toward my direction, and I was waving my arms to get her attention, signaling that was mine. So he gave the hat. I mean, she grabbed the hat, and I walked back to where she was and thanked her profusely. Although, you know, what the hell is she going to do? Like, throw it over the edge of the bridge? But she said something like, random acts of kindness. And I think that's what it was, or something to that effect. And I said, pay it forward. I don't know. And like I said, I thanked her profusely, even though it was a little unnecessary. I like taking pictures of myself in unexpected mirrors, and this one was propped up against a bunch of trash bags on 57th Street. But this looks like I wet my pants.
I did not, and I probably don't really need to clarify that I did not wet my pants, but I guess there's just some shadow play going on here. Makes me look like a really classy dude, though, right? There's the Roosevelt Island Tram, seen from the Ed Koch, Queensboro. I've been on that thing probably about a dozen times, but I know people who say you could not pay them enough money to ride that thing. And I get it. I can totally see the phobia, but I was on it one time on a very windy day. We got about halfway over and just completely could not move forward. The wind was blowing so hard, and we just sat there for a long time. It was many minutes, and people were freaking out. People were absolutely screaming and panicking, and they were like, just all the fear in the world took over. It felt contagious. I was starting to feel it myself, but all it would have taken was for the tram conductor to say something like, this is routine headwinds, it's nothing to worry about. He didn't say anything. But people freaked out, man.